All right, we're hopping into chapters 15 and 16. I was halfway through chapter 15, almost done with it whenever my computer died. So I'm trying again. Hopefully, now that it's plugged in, we won't have any issues. All right, chapter 15 of Wayside School. It gets a little stranger. An elephant in Wayside School. The bell rang for recess, and the children exploded out of the building. Louis, the yard teacher, was ready with a big pile of red and green balls. The kids called, "Hi, Louis," and "Over here, Louis," as he tossed the balls to them. Over his shoulder, behind his back, through his legs. Dee Dee came charging out of the building. Usually by the time she got to the playground, there were no good balls left. But she could see one red ball by Louis's foot. She knocked over a kid from the 10th floor and shouted, "Hey, Lou!" Suddenly she stopped. She had just remembered where she'd heard of Mrs. Drizzle. It was from Louis. He had once told her about the meanest teacher he'd ever had when he was a kid. She hurried over to her friends to make sure. "Hey, Todd," she called. Todd was playing tetherball with Ron. As he turned to look at Dee Dee, the ball came around and bonked him on the head. "Do you remember when Louis told us about the meanest teacher he ever had?" asked Dee Dee. Todd shook his head. After being conked by the tetherball, he couldn't remember anything. "I remember," said Jason, who was in the line to play. "Whenever Louis got in trouble, the teacher used to put the waste paper basket on his head." "That's right," said Jenny. "And then Louis would have to keep it there the rest of the day. And everyone would laugh at him. And then the teacher would call on him to answer questions from the blackboard, but he couldn't see the question, so she'd give him an F." "Do you remember the teacher's name?" asked Dee Dee. Her friends shook their heads. Todd couldn't even remember his own name. "I think it was Mrs. Drizzle," said Dee Dee. They ran to Louis. Hey, Louis," said Jason, "what was the name of that mean teacher you once had when you were a kid?" "Which one?" asked Louis. "The one that put the trash can on your head," said Jenny. Louis shuddered just thinking about her. "Mrs. Drizzle," he whispered. The kids looked at each other. "What color hair did she have?" asked Jason. "Brown," said Louis. "Why?" "We have a substitute teacher," explained Dee Dee. "She's real nice." "Good," said Louis. "Her name is Mrs. Drizzle," said Dee Dee. "Whoa." My mouse is going crazy. "Whoa. I'm getting out of here," said Louis. He started to run, but the kids grabbed him. "It's okay," said Jenny. "It can't be the same teacher. Our teacher is nice." "And her hair isn't brown," said Jason. "It's white." Louis relaxed a little bit. "Whew. You want to come up and meet her?" asked Dee Dee. "No way," said Louis. "Oh, you're so silly, Louis," said Dee Dee. "She's not the same teacher. And besides, you're a teacher now too." "Oh yeah, I forgot," said Louis. "Come on, Louis," said Dee Dee. She held his hand and led him up the stairs. They entered the classroom. Mrs. Drizzle was putting some of the children's work on the bulletin board. "Mrs. Drizzle," said Dee Dee, "we brought our yard teacher up to meet you." "It's very nice to meet you," said Mrs. Drizzle, as she pinned up Joe's arithmetic test. "Exercise is so important for young minds and bodies." She turned around. Louis's face paled. "Well, it was nice to meet you," he said very quickly. "I've got to go. Bye." "Stay right where you are, Louis," ordered Mrs. Drizzle. He froze. Mrs. Drizzle slowly walked to her desk. She picked up the old blue notebook. "The notebook," he whispered Louis. Mrs. Drizzle opened it and flipped through the pages. "Here we are," she said. She removed a piece of paper and handed it to Louis. "Is this your homework?" she asked. Louis looked at it. "You were supposed to copy it over, weren't you?" asked Mrs. Drizzle. "That was over 15 years ago," said Louis. "I don't remember." "I do," said Mrs. Drizzle. Oh, now I remember, said Louis. I was going to copy it over, but then my pencil point broke, so I went to sharpen it, but the pencil sharpener fell on my foot, so I had to go to the hospital. I don't want any of your famous excuses, Louis, said Mrs. Drizzle. I just want the homework. You may share Dee Dee's desk. Louis sat next to Dee Dee. And remember, Louis, said Mrs. Drizzle, I know your tricks. Dee Dee watched Louis struggle with his homework. Sorry, Louis, she said. Don't be sorry, said Mrs. Drizzle. It's for his own good, and I expect neatness, Louis, or else you'll have to just do it again. He frowned. Mrs. Drizzle stood over him and watched him work. Your fingernails are filthy, she said. I'm the yard teacher, Louis tried to explain. I spend a lot of time outside in the grass and dirt and stuff. I don't want excuses, said Mrs. Drizzle. I want clean fingernails, and while you're at it, shave off that mustache. It looks like a hairy caterpillar crawling across your face. Not my mustache, said Louis, unless you want me to rip it off for you, said Mrs. Drizzle. Dee Dee felt terrible. I can't believe Mrs. Drizzle still remembers you after all this time, she said. An elephant never forgets, muttered Louis. That didn't sound like Louis. An elephant never forgets, muttered Louis. I heard that, said Mrs. Drizzle. She put the waste paper basket on Louis's head. Wow, she's terrible. Chapter 16. Oh, gosh. Here we go. Chapter 16. Mr. Hoop. Joy, Mauricia, and Jenny were playing jump rope out on the playground. School hadn't started yet. Mauricia and Jenny were twirling. Joy sang as she jumped. My mama wore pajamas to the grocery store. She smashed a bunch of eggs on the grocery floor. 1 dozen, 2 dozen, 4 dozen, 6. She dumped a bunch of jelly jars into the mix. Grape jelly, apricot, don't forget cherry, orange marmalade, and wild strawberry. A man walked by and fell in the glop. He slid next door to the barber shop. His icky, sticky body got covered in hair. He tore a hole in his under. Joy tripped over the rope. It wasn't her fault Mauricia had suddenly stopped twirling. Hey, said Joy, what's the big idea? Look, said Mauricia, a very handsome stranger was a very handsome stranger was walking toward them. The girls stared at him. Good morning, Mauricia, said the stranger. Jenny, Joy. How do you know my name? Mauricia asked nervously. She wasn't supposed to talk to strangers. I've known you a long time, said the stranger. I see you almost every day. Mauricia was beginning to feel scared. She looked around for Louis, the yard teacher, but didn't see him. I can scream real loud, she warned. Oh my gosh, said Jenny. It's Louis. Mauricia looked at the stranger. He did sort of look like Louis, except his hair was combed, his shirt was tucked in, he was wearing a tie, and there was skin between his nose and mouth. He had shaved off his mustache. That's Mr. Louis to you, said Louis. I'm a teacher, and I expect to be treated with respect. You want to play jump rope, Mr. Louis? Asked Mauricia. Louis was great at jump rope. He could even do it blindfolded. He was the one who taught Joy the song she was singing at the beginning of this story. No, thank you, Mauricia, said Louis. I don't play games. I'm an adult. But you're a yard teacher, said Jenny. No, I'm a professional playground supervisor, Louis corrected her. He walked away. Wow, whispered Mauricia. I never knew Louis was so handsome. Jenny patted her heart. I think I'm in love, she said. I thought he looked kind of goofy, said Joy. Up in class, everyone was talking about the new Louis. He looks so weird without his mustache, said Calvin. He's handsome, said Bibi. He got mad at me for running across the blacktop, complained John. He made me go all the way back to the edge of the blacktop, then walk across it, and I had to call him Mr. Lewis. I am very proud of Lewis, said Mrs. Drizzle. He has always been a troublemaker, but I think he is trying to be good. We should all give him a chance. Joyce stared at Mrs. Drizzle. It's your fault, she thought. You made him shave off his mustache. At recess, Lewis refused to pass out the balls. I haven't washed them yet, he said. You're going to wash the balls? Asked Eric Bacon. They're filthy, said Lewis, and they all have the wrong amount of air in them. I don't care, said Eric Fry. I do, said Lewis. Before I can let you play with them, I have to clean them and pump them up with the precise amount of air as specified by Poops. Poops? Asked Eric Ovens. The Professional Organization of Playground Supervisors, explained Lewis. He showed them the Poops Handbook. Professional Organization of Playground Supervisors. Well, what are we supposed to do? Asked Eric Fry. Just play and have fun, said Lewis. But remember, stay off the grass, no running on the blacktop, no eating, and no excessive shouting. The three Erics walked away. What a booger brain, muttered Eric Bacon. Lewis heard him. That's Mr. Booger Brain to you, young man, he said. The next day, when the kids tried to go outside for recess, they only made it down to the 4th floor. The stairs were completely jammed with other kids from lower classrooms. Hey, what's going on? Shouted Joy. Lewis won't let anyone outside, somebody shouted back. He's painting the blacktop. But I have to go to the bathroom, yelled Stephen. Now he's gone too far, said Joy. Excuse me, out of my way. Sorry, coming through, she said as she squeezed in and out of kids, crawled through legs, climbed over heads until she made her way to the door at the bottom of the stairs. Lewis was slopping black paint across the blacktop. Joy could see him through the glass door. Next to him was a big bucket of paint. Mr. Lewis, she shouted so loud that even the kids back up on the 4th floor had to put their hands over their ears. He came to the door. What are you doing? Joy demanded. The blacktop isn't black, explained Lewis. It's gray. A blacktop is supposed to be black. It's right here on page 43 of the Poops Handbook. Lewis was he opened the book and showed page 43 to Joy. Joy grabbed the book and threw it out across the gray top. It landed plop in the bucket of black paint. All the kids behind her cheered. Yay! You're the poop, said Joy. Lewis's red face turned even redder. The place where his mustache used to be turned purple. That's Mr. Poop to you, he said. Oh boy, Mr. Poop. Interesting. Well, I don't know how Wayside can get any crazier, but we're going to find out. Stay tuned for the rest of the story. Quiz below.